Colorado got a good old-fashioned butt whooping, and now are they going to get spanked again by USC? Let's talk about it.
Hey everyone, what's going on? This is FanBuzz Weekly. I'm your host Patrick with my co-host Will here. We have a great lineup of topics in college football. Will, I think we need to start with the team and the man that everyone has been talking about, Deion Sanders, after they got quote unquote, a good old-fashioned butt whooping by Oregon. Where do they go from here? What do they need to fix, especially heading into USC? What can they do to sort of rebound from this loss?
Yeah, I think Coach Prime said it completely right. That was a butt whooping. I mean, every single phase of the game, it just looked like they didn't belong on the field. It almost looked like one of those early season tune-up games with like a Mountain West team or something. But there's a lot that needs to be fixed, and it's really not awesome that USC is the next game up. It's not a lot of opportunity to tinker around and figure things out. One thing that would help a lot would be getting Travis Hunter back. He's one of the very few players that helps on both sides of the ball, and he seems very determined to be getting back out there this week. He has said he won't take no for an answer, but based on Deion's comments, I think he's going to have to take no for an answer. So that's going to be a problem. Secondary looked completely toasted against Oregon. The bigger issue is that Oregon probably had the best defense that Colorado has seen yet in the Coach Prime era. Shedeur looked overwhelmed. He looked like he looked like he hadn't faced a defense like that before, which he hadn't. He needs to get rid of the ball. Deion's made some excuses about guys not getting open, but it's a very talented receiver group. With Weaver, you've even got Edwards out of the backfield. It would be great to get Travis back, but there's still dudes, and Shedeur is athletic enough to take off, or he needs to get rid of the ball. So that's going to be a huge thing. And the defense is just so soft up front. You can run all over them. I don't know what they can do to fix that in the short term. Maybe it might have to be a portal focus for Deion next offseason. We know he's happy to use the portal, but getting Travis back will help the secondary a lot, but I don't know when that'll be. I think USC is going to be able to pick a number and throw it up on the scoreboard, although their defense has been rough too. So hopefully Colorado can get more than the 7 they did last week.
Yeah, under things to fix, all I have is Travis Hunter. Like, just fix Travis Hunter first. When Bo Nix is able to throw for, 270-something yards, 3 touchdowns. Obviously he's a two-way player, so like Shedeur felt him missing as well. That was my one note. Obviously going into USC, I think there's not a lot of expectations for Colorado, and I think people got a lot ahead of themselves in terms of Colorado, national championship bound. This team was never going to do that with the players on the roster, and I don't think they need to. I think it's fine. They were 1-11 last year. They've already got 3 wins this year. They don't have to beat the Oregons, the USCs. This can just be that first huge step for Deion. Which I think is totally fine. And I think after the game, you heard him talk about how, hey, we got our asses whooped. It's okay. But, we will learn from it. And he also, I think he said, get us right now while you can. Because, in a couple years, it might not be like that. When he's able to sort of recruit those 5-star kids, more guys like Travis Hunter. Speaking of teams who sort of, letting people down, I guess, if you want to say it. Ole Miss, I'm not really sure what to make of Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin, because when it comes to the big games, it feels like they don't step up. They don't play to the caliber that they're playing again. So what do you think is going on in Ole Miss? Why are they always choking? And are they just sort of doomed to be sort of a mediocre SEC team?
I do think that doomed is a pretty good word when we're talking about a team that's stuck in the SEC West. I mean, that is a tough division. It's no Big Ten East, but it's a toughie. I think that Ole Miss is one of the better teams in the country in terms of, they definitely should be. They deserve their spot in the top 15 that they had coming into that game. But you're coming into this game with an Alabama with a chip on their shoulder. You're going into Tuscaloosa. I mean, that is not a good spot. I think there's an element of luck to a degree like that. I said it in last week's show. I would have liked that game to have been in Oxford, and it's just an odd year, even year thing. There's nothing other than luck that the fact that they caught a worse Alabama team in a year that they got to be in Tuscaloosa anyway. Michigan and OSU dealt with this for ages. We kept getting OSU's worst teams in the horseshoe, and every time they were juggernauts, they'd come to Ann Arbor. But now that's over. What happened in that game, though? Jackson Dart needs to be better. There's a reason he and everyone else have transferred out of USC. No one who's left USC is having a nice year. JT Daniels, I guess he's having a better year, but he's on his 4th school. Keaton Slovis looks terrible. Dart had good protection in that game. He just was not accurate enough. I think he was under 60% completion, maybe barely over 50. O-line protected him well, but couldn't get the run game going. They basically got beat up at the point of attack. So it's just tough to beat Alabama. And a lot of these ranked games that you see Lane Kiffin losing, like so many of them are specifically Alabama. So I wonder what that number would look like if we just removed Alabama from the equation. Because not that you want to make excuses or bow down to any program, but Alabama's an outlier. That's not a normal statistical piece.
And of course, it's his old buddy Nick Saban, who he has a ton of respect for. He always talks about him. But yeah, I mean, to go 3-8 against AP top 25 teams. Here's the thing: I think you're right. I think Ole Miss is fine. It's just the SEC is tough, and it's only going to get tougher. The good news is next year they don't play Bama. Like that's if there's a silver lining, they still have Florida, LSU, Georgia, and they add Oklahoma next year. But like, I don't think it's panic time in Ole Miss. And also, if you were to panic, who are you going to go get that's better than Lane Kiffin? Like, that's always the thing to me. Is like, okay, you want to get rid of a coach, who are you going to go get? So like, I think they're fine. I think you're right. It's just, it's hard to go into Tuscaloosa and win, unless you're just the outright much better team. Like it's just very difficult. Speaking of AP top 25 teams, which teams do you think should be, higher or lower? Which teams are being disrespected or maybe not respected enough? I have one team in mind that we might agree on here, but I want to hear from you.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear what that is. As always, my big gripe with the AP poll is that the Pac-12 is getting disrespected a little bit. USC, I believe, is at 8. They definitely have flaws, but the offense is genuinely unstoppable. They're first in EPA per play, per game, like per drop. Like every single possible advanced metric has USC's offense as not one of the top offenses, but the top offense. Caleb is absolutely transcendent. I was skeptical on some of the hype, but I'm buying into him way more than I ever did Trevor Lawrence. The other one is another Pac-12 team. UCLA is out, and they should be in. I'm not sure why Oregon State gets to stay in after a ranked loss, but UCLA doesn't. It just doesn't make sense. And UCLA still played their game in that loss. Dante Moore had an off day. That's fine. He's a true freshman who went up against the first great defense he's seen. But the UCLA defense still, muscled up and held Utah, I believe, 14. So I think that they're going to be back in the poll before too long, but they never should have left. As far as teams that should be lower, there's that whole cluster of Pac-12 teams that's right below Penn State, and they've all done more. All the undefeated ones, maybe not all of them should be above Penn State, but definitely, like I said, USC, maybe Oregon, who just blew out Colorado. Washington, I think, is below Penn State. Might be wrong there, but that would be crazy. I mean, their passing offense looks unbelievable, Michael Penix, and they have one of the better defensive fronts out west. And the last one I would like to say is Oklahoma should be lower. They're like 14th. They haven't done anything. I think they've played an FCS game even, and they're ahead of North Carolina and Duke, who are both 4-0. North Carolina has Drake May and all of a sudden a great rushing offense, and Duke beat Clemson 28-7. We could talk more about Clemson. I'm not going to say they should be ranked at 2-2, but I definitely do think it depends on the whole philosophy, because when all is said and done, they will be a top 25 team in this country, no doubt. But those are my takes. I can't wait to see what you've got waiting for me here.
I mean, you already touched on one. I'm going to keep it on the Pac-12 train. I think Washington's a top 4 team, if we're being honest. And I would take out Texas or Ohio State, probably Ohio State after that game, because I didn't think they wowed anyone against Notre Dame. I know it was 2 pretty great defenses going up against each other, but watching Kyle McCord, I mean, I wasn't like, this is a CFP quarterback. He didn't, but then when you look at Washington's offense, which is one of the best in the country, I think it's a no-brainer, but I think that's also part of the Pac-12 effect where, like, if people aren't watching them, they don't know about them. There's no sort of hype around them. But like, I think I'd take out maybe Texas, who doesn't have a top 10 defense or offense. That was my only gripe, is that I feel like Washington is just being disrespected. And when it's all said and done, they might have the Heisman Trophy winner, which we'll get to. We're going to talk about sort of the Heisman race, but I want to talk about this weekend. Obviously coming off, last weekend, we had a great slate of games. I don't know if you were sitting on the couch like I was all day, but I didn't want to go anywhere. And for good reason, because there was just nonstop action. Who do you have on upset alert this weekend?
Someone you just talked about as a team you don't really believe in, Texas. Kansas has been a tougher team in the last couple of years. They're one of the better stories to start last year. They were kind of like a Colorado with less hype, where they just turned it around and roared out of the gates with a bunch of wins. But Jalen Daniels is PFF's second highest rated qualifying passer. The kid is tremendous. I think he had some injury issues last year and the team looked completely different. And with him, firing on all cylinders, playing his best football, I'm not picking them, but I definitely think Texas should be concerned. This is another one where if it was in Lawrence instead of in Austin, we'd be talking about a legitimate upset maybe pick. The other one is Notre Dame. I believe in this team a lot more than I did preseason. I think they've actually looked really sharp over the first few games of the season. They were one of the teams that I was going to say could be ahead of Penn State, but it's tough. They have a loss. Penn State doesn't, but they look better. This is a huge letdown spot. I mean, they were close to picking up one of the bigger wins in the country so far, and they came a snap short. And Duke is solid. I mean, they took down that Clemson team. They're 4-0. Riley Leonard looks outstanding. We've seen this from Duke before where they start strong and kind of taper, but if Notre Dame takes this for granted after losing to Ohio State and coming so close, Duke could come in and steal this one, move to 5-0, and then we're having some really interesting conversations about Duke.
Yeah, I think it either goes like two ways for Notre Dame, right? You come off that loss with a sort of chip on your shoulder, trying to prove the world that you're still, Notre Dame, or it goes the other way and you just kind of like, well, maybe our season's over. Maybe we're not as good as we thought we were. I have the same team you were just talking about, Kansas. I feel like no one's really talking about the fact that Jalen Daniels, like for the first half of last season, was like in the Heisman race. Like that's how good he was. And they still have him. Like I had to look on the roster to be like, wait, isn't Jalen Daniels still the quarterback there? They're 4-0. I don't think they've played anyone too notable, but all I can think about is 2 years ago when Kansas went in, they finished 2-10 in 2021. They were 31-point underdogs in Austin and they won in and beat them in overtime. And that's hard to do, to come into DKR and beat, Texas. But all I can think about is like, is history going to repeat itself? I also have maybe South Carolina over Tennessee. I know it's in Knoxville, but I mean, after watching Florida beat Tennessee, I don't have any faith in Joe Milton. I just don't think he's accurate enough. Obviously, I'm a little biased as a Gator, but like I think South Carolina is more solid than people give them credit for. They played Georgia tough that first half. Those would be my two. I'm kind of hoping for a Kansas win just because I'm here for the chaos, right? The shakeup in the top 4, the top 10 teams. But yeah, who knows? Who knows what'll happen? We need to talk about Ryan Day's post-game press conference because it almost looked like, I don't know. He deserves an Oscar for whatever that performance was. He started to cry a little bit, and obviously he called out Lou Holtz, who, Lou Holtz, I guess before the game was kind of talking smack about Ohio State, saying they weren't physical, this and that. Like, do you agree with what Ryan Day said and him calling out Lou Holtz? And then, what are your thoughts on how, Kyle McCord and Ohio State played that game?
Well, for one, I, as a Michigan fan, love that instead of calling out 86-year-olds who haven't coached a college football game since 2004, my head coach uses his post-game pressers to hand the mic to his players and let them talk about what they've done. So that doesn't suck as a Michigan fan, but granted, Holtz did bring it upon himself. He was saying some stuff about Ohio State, and I guess the Day can't quite just pretend that never happened, especially after that result. But I get what Holtz was saying. They weren't able to make Ohio State pay for it in this game, but every one of their major losses has been about a toughness deficit. They've just been owned at the line of scrimmage, both sides of the ball by Michigan for 2 years, and that's been the definition of what's happened to them. That's their whole legacy over the last 2 years is defined by not beating Michigan, and that's what Ryan Day is at this point. He's about to be 0-3 against Michigan, so he's going to be on a hot seat, so I understand why he's getting a little bit intense, but the Ohio versus everyone narrative is hilarious. I mean, it's almost on the same level as Kirby Smart convincing Georgia that they're underdogs. I can't believe he's done that, but this is a team that gets ranked second or third every year before they've accomplished everything, and Day's convinced his players that they're all out to get him. It's great mental warfare, and you need your team to have a chip on your shoulder. As a Michigan fan, I know what happens when your team starts believing they're good, but I don't know. They're not it. I think that was a really interesting game in the sense that the Ohio State defense showed up for the first time in a huge game. To that extent, first time in many years. That edge rushing duo of JT and Sawyer was just phenomenal. They took care of Notre Dame's solid offensive line. It's just ironic to me that Ohio State finally has the defense to contend and doesn't have a quarterback that can even reliably deliver the ball to those crazy receivers they have. I mean, McCord, the confidence that it takes to lead that last drive is impressive, but as far as actual football ability, you saw Marvin making some pretty outstanding catches to keep the game alive. So it's a the 17 points in that one is probably an indictment on McCord to an extent, but hats off to the Notre Dame defense. That secondary is incredible. I'm really, really trying to figure out any way I can will either of my favorite NFL teams to draft Morrison. That guy's incredible. But Ohio State still not tough until further notice. We'll see him Thanksgiving weekend in Ann Arbor.
I mean, this is a game they were like 6 seconds away from losing the game, right? Like if they don't run it in because Notre Dame had 10 people on the field for those final 2 plays or whatever it was, like Ryan Day came in hot, like they had just won by 30 to call out Lou Holtz. And also it's like, yeah, you're calling out an 86-year-old, like you want to throw hands with him. Like it was totally bizarre. I'm just picturing him listening to Lou Holtz the day before, because Lou Holtz was basically naming off the teams that had beat Ryan Day, and I can just picture him like seething with like the Arthur Fist meme like by his side, like he's like, I'm gonna get you, Lou Holtz. And it's just like, what are we doing, dude? Like there's no need to even talk about Lou Holtz at that point. But honestly, I hope the beef continues. I think it's great for college football when we have this sort of thing, similar to like Deion taking everything personally. Like it's fun for us fans, right? Let's go back to the ACC. We talked a little bit about UNC and Duke. They're both 4-0. Like, are these teams legitimate CFP contenders in the ACC?
Man, the ACC is fascinating this year. Kind of saw it coming in a conference that I don't usually care too much about, but it's an exciting year in the ACC. And it's just funny to me that the best battle between Duke and UNC right now is in football. That is not what we're used to with these two colleges. North Carolina, the defense looks much improved. And by that, I mean like almost average instead of unplayable. While the offense is 17th in per play EPA, amazingly driven by rushing, which is really encouraging because the rushing attack was going to be a question, but Drake May and the air game should come up. The Devontae Walker situation is really, really unfortunate, but Drake is going to overcome it. He'll adjust. He's a great player. As far as Duke, we're going to see what they're made of against Notre Dame. They're 17th in success rate right now on both sides or between the two sides of the ball. It's just a great start to the year for them. That Clemson win doesn't look like too much of a sham, at least. In terms of the playoff, winning the ACC is an absolute must for both of these teams. And really, just branding-wise, this shouldn't be a part of it, but it is. They probably, either one of them has to be undefeated to actually get selected to the playoff. The good news is that Duke already beat Clemson. That's one of the biggest hurdles for them. They're going to go to FSU October 21st. Meanwhile, UNC dodges FSU and goes to Clemson on November 18th. And the two teams play each other on November 11th at UNC. But the schools are 14 minutes apart. There's going to be lots of Duke fans there anyways. So I'm super excited to see that one. I'm going to take UNC, I think, based on what I've seen so far. But, man, that's going to be a fight. I can't wait to see Duke Notre Dame this weekend. We'll learn a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now it's, the only real team that could be a contender in the ACC, in my opinion, is FSU. But I think you're right. I think one of these teams has to be undefeated and win the ACC. You got to beat FSU. I think right now it's a little early, and it's like, I guess we can consider them contenders. I also don't think their schedules are too tough in the same way that like the Pac-12 is just a monster right now, or the SEC has historically been, even though it's not as strong this year. So I mean, I think you're right in that even a one-loss ACC champion for them, I don't know, like it becomes complicated because there are so many good teams out of different divisions and conferences. Let's talk about the Heisman Trophy. Who do you think is sort of the front runner right now? I have two names, Caleb Williams and Michael Penix Jr. Or is there someone else? Do you think it's one of them? Actually, I'll start first because we've already talked about Penix. I think it's him. I think, because of sort of the stats, he's got the most passing touchdowns, passing yards, what that offense is doing right now. Obviously, they still have to play Oregon, USC, Utah, who has a really great defense. I think right now it's him. I still think it's neck and neck. But also, I think no one's won the Heisman, twice since Archie Griffin at Ohio State. So, like, even if they're neck and neck and voters think they're, even, I think it's not going to Caleb, right? Like, I think Caleb has to sort of dominate everyone. And then, Michael needs to fall off a little bit for him to win it again. And obviously, we can't ignore the fact that like team success does play a part in this. So like if Washington does go to the playoff, I think that just only like bolsters his chances. What do you think? Is it one of these two guys or is it someone else?
I think Quinn Ewers has a chance. I don't know if I'd call him the front runner, and I don't think he should be in this race, but I could totally see the Pac-12 cannibalizing. Both these teams have 2 losses. Texas goes 12-0 because the Big 12 is terrible, but Quinn has that win at Alabama sitting in his back pocket. That's the scenario I'm pretty afraid of, but I'm glad the award's not being awarded right now because I want these guys, Penix and Caleb, to create some separation between each other because there's literally none. Drop back EPA, USC's 4th, Washington's 6th. Per PFF, Penix is 2nd best passer in the country. Caleb is 3rd. It's ridiculous. Penix has more big-time throws and less turnover-worthy plays, which is huge. But Washington also has PFF's favorite wideout core, and USC has the 6th best. So there's such little margins between these two. I agree with you that right now it would have to be Penix. He's got more volume, which is a big thing in the eyes of the voters. Neither team has played many great opponents so far, so it's kind of a wash there. But I think the voter fatigue thing is real. These voters are all about, in college football, there's so much about tradition and perception. And there's going to be so many people who are like, if Tim Tebow didn't get 2 Heisman trophies, neither should Caleb Williams, which that's 2 wrongs making a right. Tebow should have 2, but that's a whole other story for another time. Really, Penix's play is more unexpected, and ultimately that's what it's going to end up coming down to. He's just going to have made more of an impact by this having come out of, I don't want to say nowhere, because he's a great player and has been, but it's different than following up a Heisman caliber season with another Heisman caliber season. I think you're right that if they do remain neck and neck all year, Caleb would have to pull away rather than just stay a notch ahead in order to actually get the repeat. But man, that would be a close vote. What it will come down to, though, in a huge way, is these 2 teams play on November 4th. If Caleb looks a lot better than Penix, the final stats might not need to be that different. If they're about the same, but Caleb owned him head-to-head, maybe if he does it again in the conference championship game, or even if Penix wins the first one, but Caleb wins the Pac-12 head-to-head, it'd be really, really hard to vote for Penix if Caleb was better than him head-to-head in the biggest moments. But right now, my vote would be Penix, but it's extremely close, and we've got a long way to go. I mean, Max Duggan ended up on the stage by the time all was said and done last year, so who knows what we'll see next.
November 4th, circle it on the calendars. That's the one to watch, everyone. That's going to do it for us at FanBuzz Weekly. Once again, my name is Patrick. This is Will. Make sure you guys like and subscribe and tune in next week for, a whole lineup of college football topics. We might be talking about a different Heisman contender, so we'll see. So thanks for watching, guys.